لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. سبحانك لا فهم لنا إلا ما فهمتنا إنك أنت الجواد الكريم. وقل رب زدني علما. قال الإمام النووي رحمه الله تبارك وتعالى ونفعنا بعلومه في الدارين. قال وعن أبي ذر رضي الله عنه قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يا أبا ذر إذا طبخت مرقة فأكثر ماءها وتعاهد جيرانك. رواه مسلم. وفي رواية له عن أبي ذر قال إن خليلي أوصاني إذا طبخت مرقة فأكثر ماءها ثم انظر أهل بيت من جيرانك فأصب منهم بمعروف. So continuing with the rights of the neighbors and the advice that was extended by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, by Allah Jalla Jalaluhu and His Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in their regard. So this is a continuation basically of the hadith that we heard yesterday. And here is the hadith of Abi Dharr radiallahu ta'ala anhu, where he mentions that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said to him, Ya Abu Dharr, O Abu Dharr, when you cook maraqatan, a soup, and generally this was the food of the Arabs at that time, was not the delicacies that we have in our homes and that we go out to the restaurants in these days. They would, whatever they had, if they had a little bit of meat, they would throw it in the water, throw in some salt and maybe a little black pepper or something like that, and they would cook a soup. And that would be something quite, extravagant actually. So when they would end, definitely if somebody had something of that nature to eat, probably his neighbors didn't. So Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam gave the advice that when you cook, you cook a soup or a stew, or whatever you would like to call it, maraq, then put in extra water than you normally would. فَأَكْثِرْ مَعَ, put in extra water, more water. وَتَعَهَدْ جِيرَانَكَ, and keep in mind your neighbors. In other words, give them some as well. And in those days, of course, houses were small and houses were also in close proximity, very thin walls. Sometimes the walls would be nothing more than a mat. And so if somebody was cooking something, also they would smell the fragrance of that cooking. So it's mentioned that if you are bringing fruit to your house, then the neighbors would probably be seeing that. And so it would be advisable then to give some to the children and the people of your neighbors close by, particularly if they're in need. So in another very similar hadith, the same concept, that when you cook a soup or a broth, and increase in the water, and then see a family, ala baytin min jirark, and see some house of your neighbors. And probably, as we heard earlier, the closer the door, the more the right. However, it may be that some are in more of need, and we happen to know about that. So, فَأَصِبْ مِنْهُمْ بِمَعْرُوفٍ, and so let them, in other words, give to them according to the good practice and the customary good practice. And this, our deen, Islam, is full of such beautiful practices. And as I mentioned yesterday, if we would put into practice these practices, and for example, if we would also look at our neighbors, and when we cook a nice dish, send a little to our neighbors. Probably many of you in the countries, those who have come from other countries like in India, Pakistan, the Arab countries, we all probably were doing that in those countries. And when we come here to America, then do in Rome as the Romans do, but actually that's not the policy. Do in wherever you are as Rasulullah did, and as Muslims should do. And you are we all are the vice regents of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the representatives of His Rasulullah in this world, and particularly in this country. We're all ambassadors, right? So if we would just, and give some, and say, look, our Prophet has taught us that we are supposed to, look after our neighbors, that people would be dumbfounded. Oh, wow. Nobody cares about their neighbors. They don't even know their names or what they live or they die or what happens. So if we would just show, some concern in this regard, it may have a huge impact, and who knows, as Nabi Alayhi Salatu said, that if one person is rightly guided by you, it's better for you than a whole lot of red camels. In other words, the best of wealth at that time. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq and make us means of reviving these sunnats, and also it's mentioned in hadith, the one who revives a dead sunnah, a practice of Rasul alayhi salatu wasalam, he will be granted the reward of 100 martyrs. Now the Sahaba, when they heard that, they said, Ya Rasulullah, 100 martyrs of our time or of their time? No, of your time. So that's a great thing. And why? Because martyrdom is for what? The spread of deen, for the sake of the service of deen. So that's what deen, the effort is all about, is reviving the deen. So may Allah give us all tawfiq to be means of that revival. Ameen. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen.